Welcome back to another Sandler webinar, everybody. I'm Mike Montague, Vice President of Online Learning, and I have here with me Sean Coyle. He is one of our prospecting experts and longtime Sandler trainers, been with the network for a couple of decades now, right, Sean?
It's pretty darn close. November of '99, so we're coming up on 19, 20 years.
That's awesome. Congratulations. And those of you who are not familiar with Sean's work is one of our prospecting experts. He does a lot of things, so I don't want to put you in a box. But if we had to pick one, he is known for doing like live cold calls in front of rooms of dozens or hundreds of people, not afraid to pick up the phone, have a prospecting conversation, and he's going to show you how to take the pressure and stress out of that. I'm sure a couple of million calls, Sean, will take the pressure out of your cold calls for you, but also I'm sure you've collected some best practices from around our network and your 20 years of teaching this that we can share today with the people, right?
Yeah, looking forward to it. And yeah, it's been a lot of years, a lot of calls, a lot of mistakes. And I think you put that all together and some best practices do end up coming from it.
And if you're not familiar with Sandler training, we have been around for about 50 years since David Sandler started this. And we're now in over 250 locations, 31 countries, over 500,000 hours of training we do annually in things like sales, leadership, sales management, customer service training. There's assertiveness and gut stuff. And we're really excited that we're in verticals now. So we've even specialized these programs down into smaller groups, like for financial services, information technology. If you're in software sales, we do a ton of work in that area. We also have construction and construction materials and all kinds of things. Anything that you would add in a 30-second commercial about Sandler training, Sean?
Yeah, I mean, I think the exciting thing about the organization going vertical is, we've taken some really great curriculum and some really great best practices over the last 50 years, and we've really been able to specialize it. So working with industry leaders from these different vertical marketplaces, we've been able to, in essence, kind of reskin our curriculum. And, we're embedding the buzzwords and the tribal knowledge, necessary to help, make those people selling in those verticals more effective. So it's very, very exciting.
And there's something you should know about that process that we go through with everybody, which is it's a growth process. There's no magic button that we can go and find on the back of a salesperson's neck or something that we push that and magically they're fixed and they sell, the way every salesperson would want to for the rest of their career. Unfortunately, it's a growth process that we have to learn over time. So what we can do in this 30-minute webinar here today is give you some awareness about things you didn't know were possible, or maybe some things to try in your prospecting that will take the pressure off you and the prospect, and a little bit of knowledge about how to do that. But we have a full online course where we go into detail. We have a full book called Prospect the Sandler Way. And Sean does workshops around the country at our local training centers where we really go into depth here. So we're just going to scratch the surface on the knowledge. And what we don't have time today is to have everybody apply this information, make cold calls themselves, try it, figure out what works and doesn't work, adjust your tone, and take ownership and become master prospectors in the next 30 minutes. So I like to set that realistic sort of upfront contract for our time together here, that our goal is to give you as much awareness as possible about what is possible on your prospecting calls, and a little bit of knowledge about how to do that. But you're probably going to have to take this knowledge into your own hands. So I want to show you a quick way to do that. If you go to sandler.com/no pressure prospecting, you will land on this event offer page. So we have a couple of special offers for you down here at the bottom. You can, for $49, enroll yourself in Sean Coyle's No Pressure Prospecting course. He hosted that one for us. It's inside of Sandler Online. You get video coaching. There's audio downloads, worksheets to help you perfect your scripts and prepare for calls. All of that is in an online course that looks just like this. There are 6 lessons, and each lesson has several short videos that you can start and stop at any time. And you can hear Sean talk about the goals of prospecting, what you want to accomplish, and click through to the next lesson and study at your own pace. So if we're going too fast for you today, it's because we only have 30 minutes and there's so much here to unpack around prospecting. We probably don't have time to get to it. Also on this page, you'll see an offer for a free training session at a local training center. So like I mentioned, there's over 250 locations. There's probably one near you, especially if you're in the United States and Canada, but there's also 31 countries there. So don't let this be the end of it. Don't just say, oh yeah, I'm already doing all of this, or that sounded good, I'll have to try that someday. You're gonna have to leave this webinar with an action plan. Anything that you would add to that, Sean?
No, I think, if we think about any new skill set that we've attempted to, acquire, or if you have children, any, skill sets we've tried to get our children to acquire, we know the first step is, whether it's golf or baseball or swimming or tennis, we need that awareness. We need to know the rights and the wrongs, the do's and the don'ts. And we gather that knowledge through observation. We gather that knowledge maybe by reading. We gather that knowledge because perhaps teachers and such, coaches guide us in a particular direction. But the real trick is, how do I take all of that information and now use it? And that really is the application, ownership, and mastery piece. And really, one way that we, or a couple of ways we begin to move in that direction of mastery is through repetition. And so it's not, taking the lesson and learning it and there's a lot of things I know about different sports, but I can't execute all those things because I don't repeat them and practice them on a regular basis. So we have to apply, we have to practice, we have to be constantly looking at leaders, mentors that can guide us through that learning and development process, keep us from reverting to bad habits, and always improving, learning something new to layer on the old things that we've gained. So I think it's important that, first we know what we're supposed to be doing and how we're supposed to be doing it right. But I think we've got to practice. We have to repeat. We have to be leaning on people to continually hold us accountable to change and improve our technique. And over time, we do get some level of ownership and then ultimately mastery, which is the goal. But if you talk to people that have achieved mastery, what they will tell you is they've not stopped in the application phase. They're constantly going back and tweaking and fixing. And those that have achieved mastery in business, in entertainment, in sport, all these parts of life, they have coaches and mentors that are constantly guiding them and challenging them. And I think that's the real key.
Absolutely. And I know sometimes we use sports as a metaphor a little too often, but I think of that like a baseball pitcher, that when you're prospecting, you can do all you want to memorize your script and have a really great plan for a call. But as soon as that other person picks up the phone, they're throwing you a curveball in the dirt and you have to learn how to adjust your plan, right? So it's not as easy as, okay, Sean, tell me what to say and I'll go say it and make a sale. There's a lot of moving pieces to this. So let's start with, what is the goal of prospecting and what are we trying to accomplish here in a no pressure prospecting call?
Sure, I think, and this is kind of pre-call, right? So as we sit down to, make our calls, whether it's, 5 calls in 15 minutes or 50 calls in 60, whatever, our prospecting time looks like, as elementary as it sounds, I think we have to have some objectives so that we're not simply kind of going through the motions and, oh, I did my 10 dials or I talked to my 3 people. I think we have to be deliberate in what we're trying to accomplish. And really part of that is if we're going to take the effort and really go through the pain and hassle, and let's be honest, folks, it's a pain and a hassle to prospect. Our parents taught us growing up to do the exact opposite of what people are asking us to do as prospectors. They said things like, don't talk to strangers, only speak unless spoken to. Good little boys and girls are seen but not heard. Stop asking so many questions. Right? Well, we might have heard that growing up. We might be saying that to, those of us that have children, to our own children. And so it runs counter to what we're supposed to do as somebody who has a responsibility for prospecting. And I think in most businesses, prospecting is a priority, although not always treated as such. And so when we sit down to make those calls, in a week, in a month, in a day, in an hour, we really have to be very deliberate in what we're trying to accomplish. And I think part of that is make sure that we're targeting the right people. We're reaching out to and making attempts to the right types of people. And as simple as that sounds, it's not calling somebody who you would be comfortable calling on, right? Perhaps a peer-to-peer in some cases, but calling to the people who have the ability to make decisions on the product or service that you're selling. So I think one of the goals of prospecting is to make sure that we're talking to the right people and we're having these prospecting conversations with the people that we need to be having them with. I think the other piece is we need to make sure that when we make appointments, we're making them at the right time, right? And when somebody says, "Oh, call me back in 6 months," we don't count that as an appointment. And I used to do it. So, if somebody just kind of looked away from the screen and said, "Oh, that's me," I've done that before. But I think we need to make sure that, we're picking a place and time where we're going to meet with these folks, whether it be virtually or in person, and for the right amount of time, oftentimes in my early days, starting out in sales 25 years ago, I would say, "Michael, do you have 15 minutes where I could stop by, tell you a little bit about my business?" And many prospects would say, "Sure, stop by for 15 minutes. But I had already set my upfront contract. I already laid out expectations, because at about minute 14, my prospects were saying, "Well, listen, thanks for your time. Leave your things and, follow up with a phone call in a few weeks." And I would be frustrated. So I think we need to make sure that, our goal is to make appointments with the right people for the right amount of time, at the right time, and most importantly, for the right reasons. And by right reasons, we've taken the opportunity to at least dig a little deeper in that conversation. Is there a mutual agreement that there's benefit in exploring a relationship? Not simply taking the appointment or setting the appointment because we bullied our way in. And I've certainly done that as well too. "Well, when are you available? Tuesday or Thursday?" "I'll be there." Versus even, at the end of that call saying, "I'm looking forward, Michael, to spending some time with you in the next couple of weeks. In preparation, what are the top 2 or 3 things you want to make sure we're talking about, as it relates to you or your organization in relationship to my products or services that'll make that time valuable?" Find some indication that there might be some challenges to try to go out and fix. So the real goal is, let's get appointments with the right types of people at the right times for the right amount of time and for all the right reasons.
And I would add to that, the right reasons include like furthering the relationship. That I think a lot of the reasons people put too much pressure on themselves in the prospect is they're trying to get married on the first date. You're on a cold call trying to make a sale and get a year-long contract when that's not the right time and not the right reason to be making that call. The reason to do a prospecting call is to find out if this person could be a prospect, not to make a sale, right? Which is a tough thing for a lot of people to learn, and we'll get to that more here in a second. But I also wanted to share with everybody Sandler's definition of success, because this is important as we move through the prospecting calls, is that we've talked a little bit about that personal growth process, but you can't just learn a script. You can't just make calls and expect to get better. You have to have the right attitude on those calls. You have to make the dials and do the appropriate number of dials, and you have to improve your technique. So as we dive deeper into these, Sean, can you share with me some behavioral challenges that you see with salespeople that typically struggle with prospecting?
Sure. So if you think of those elements of success, behavior being in that lower left-hand part of the triangle, one way that I think about behaviors is it's our blueprint for a success. It's creating a cookbook. Establishing a vision, having some goals, and creating some action plans. Could I go out as an experienced home builder and build a home without a blueprint? I'm sure I could, but it would have come with some problems. It would probably cost more than originally expected. It would take longer and likely not be structurally sound, and so thereby not passing any form of inspection. And so I think we have to really think about our own prospecting activities, regardless of what level or tenure you are in a business. This message is not only for the brand new people that are just getting started, that are picking up and making pure cold calls for their 6 months of their lives. This is for that 25-year professional who's got a different centers of influence, who's got a different degree of relationships, but needs to make sure that they're, again, deliberate about their activities. And so as I've talked to people in, brand new to super experienced and everybody in between, I think there are some common challenges around creating the proper behaviors. One is people not making it a priority. And the first step to prioritizing it is, is it in your calendar? So if I think about opening up my calendar, the things that are important to me reside in my calendar. It's an internal meeting. It's a training session with a client. It's a sales call with a prospect. It's a closing, right? Those are priorities in my business. I also have priorities in my life. Making it to my daughter's lacrosse game, being at my son's baseball practice, right? Those are priorities. If it's not in my calendar, it means I'm not worried about missing it. If it's in my calendar, it's telling me that I shouldn't miss this. And it's not in my calendar as, hey, just do this today. It's got a specific time. So I think one of the big challenges is we don't prioritize it. We don't treat it like the other things that we place in our calendar. And I remember sitting in a seminar a long time ago, and the speaker said, if you look at what's important to you in your life, you'll get an indication by opening your calendar and looking at your checking account. Because those two areas will tell you the things that are most important to you. And I scratched my head and I looked at my calendar and I said, yep, those are all important to me. If it's not there in my calendar, it's probably not important. And then I opened up the checking account and yep, those are all the things that are important to me, where money comes from, where money goes to. I'm not paying for it if it's not important to me. I'm not getting money from it if it's not important to me. So it was a very interesting concept. I think another thing that people struggle with around behavior is not having clarity in their purpose, right? Not really focusing on the right key performance indicators, simply going through the motions. And I think as you sit down to execute prospecting activities, we want to make sure that we're very clear on our purpose. How many people do I want to talk to? How many appointments do I want to set? How many referrals, right? How many advances? And so having some very specific objectives for that period of time. And so I think that's another behavior challenge. And the final is really the misconception that a prospecting call is a sales call. Again, if you go back to the goal of prospecting, it's to set the appointment. It's to set the appointment with the right person for the right amount of time, at the right time, for all the right reasons. Do I need to have some level of understanding as to what challenges they're facing for me to show up? Absolutely. Do I have to keep that person on the phone for 45 minutes during a cold call in an attempt to close the deal? I think absolutely not. Now, everybody's business model is a little different, right? So, I've worked with logistics companies. Well, if they get a prospect on the phone, do they want the appointment? Sure, but perhaps in the moment, they might be able to get a truckload off of somebody's stock and as a test run. So I know everybody's a little different with that caveat, but let's make sure we're focused on closing for the appropriate action item, not just always trying to close the sale. But I think those are some big behavior challenges for people.
And I'll second that last one for sales managers as well. That so often we see sales managers say, did you sell anything today? And you're like, well, that's great. And we want to know that. If you're talking about prospecting, did you sell anything today is the wrong question to be asking yourself or your salespeople. Did you do the things necessary today to close business in the future is what you want to know. Because if your sales cycle is 1 week or 1 year, what you're doing today influences those results and sales you get later, not the other way around. So some of that is some attitude stuff there too, but what do you see as common attitude challenges?
Sure, and again, attitude is really the quality of what happens between your ears. Right, and there's a lot of things that we say to ourselves that both discourage and get in the way of effective prospecting. One is just being emotionally involved at all, and really that's a common attitude challenge in the entire sales process. Sometimes being emotionally involved simply means I don't even begin the process. I look at the list of people I'm supposed to call today, and perhaps I place them on a pedestal, inappropriately. Here I am as a sales guy, and on my list is the CEO of a building. Am I ready to get there yet? Well, why don't I call another sales guy and see if I can work my way up the food chain? So sometimes I get emotionally involved because I'm uncomfortable or I lack confidence or self-esteem to call the people I'm supposed to be calling on. Sometimes I get thrown that curveball, as you mentioned earlier. I'm sitting there in the batter's box and I'm ready for the fastball, and here comes that inside slider, and I was nowhere near ready for it. And it's a called strike by the umpire. I'm yelling at him. I'm yelling at myself, right? And I'm out of the game completely, right? And perhaps I don't even want to step back into that batter's box. So I think the big challenge is to isolate yourself from those emotions and that self-talk that may cause you to engage in activities of creative avoidance. That might cause you to get stressed out. At the end of the day, yes, it's uncomfortable, it's unpleasant, but it's a necessity. But I think the more you apply, the more you practice, the more you repeat, that becomes less and less of a challenge. I think another challenge that people have is, as a result of emotional involvement, sometimes they get too strong, they get too forceful, they get too aggressive over the telephone. We've all learned things over the years that we feel would be really cool to say over the phone. If somebody throws us that curveball or throws an objection our way. I remember I learned one years ago, and I don't encourage anybody to say this out loud, but I remember, somebody taught me, when somebody says, send me information and call me in a couple of weeks, the one-liner was, well, would you like me to just throw the information out on my end and save us both a step? Well, that's a pretty gutsy, cool thing to say, but it doesn't achieve my objective. It doesn't enhance the relationship. It might make me feel better about myself, but at the end of the day, it's probably going to tick somebody off and never give me another opportunity to speak to them again. So, sometimes we have to avoid weaponizing the things that we've learned. We don't want to be combative on the phone. And then the flip side of that is, finding a balance between being too strong, but also avoiding being too weak. Avoiding, kind of that mother may I approach, the adaptive child, where, we do exactly what we're told. There needs to be a collaboration between salespeople and prospects. And collaboration to me means we work mutually together to an end goal. And sometimes that means we have to move a little bit off center, they have to move a little bit off center. But first we have to know what center is, right? And be willing to stick to our guns, but stick to our guns for the right reasons. Oftentimes, and I think I had a client even share this with me, I can't have my salespeople learning how to sell my product 22 different ways to 22 different customers. I need my 22 different customers to learn how to buy one way from me. Doesn't mean that we're not going to work together, but I think we're the experts. We're the ones that know how to fix the problems. So let's make sure that we do stick to our guns on certain things that are critical to the success of a relationship.
And I think that's key, even for new salespeople or experienced ones, is when we've trained over 1 million salespeople, Sean, over the last 50 years, all of them were too weak or too strong. There's nobody that sits that perfect balance all the time with every prospect or customer and challenges them enough to make them think and change their mind, but nurturing enough to let them feel safe and welcome and enjoy the process. That's the tough part that I think is really the key here in getting your attitude right. And that leads us to techniques, which can be tricky. This is using the right tool at the right time, the right line to get the right results. Where do you see salespeople messing this up and putting too much pressure on themselves and the salesperson? Prospect.
Sure. So I think a lot of times it really starts with, the minute they get that prospect on the phone, they become this different version of themselves. And I think we all have to have that self-awareness. Do I sound like me? Or do I sound like some odd version of myself, saying things I don't normally say, saying them in a way that I wouldn't normally say them, and frankly, just going through the motions, right? Hi, I'm Sean Coyle. I'm from Sandler Training. This is what we do. Are you interested in a conversation? Right? Because it's one of many, right? It might be my first of 100. It might be my 99th of 100. But I'm not treating each conversation as a unique opportunity to get something from, to get something from somebody, get information, get a relationship, perhaps get an appointment. And so I think, we don't want to just be this is what I'm doing, this is how I do it. Now, you probably need to start there, because if you get there first, that means you've got the words down. So I think it's important that from a technique perspective, we know what we're supposed to say, we know our pivots, and we could be able to sound like a robot, but the better we know it, the more we can become like ourselves and sound less robotic, sound less like I'm reading off of my resume or brochure. So I think that's a big technique challenge. I think the other thing is the introduction of too many variables is a challenge. Going in a lot of different directions. Well, what about this? What about that? What about this? What about that? What about, it's kind of knowing what's the center point. Right? What are the key problems you're fixing for your marketplace that you're selling to, and really focusing your dialogue there. And so, but I think sometimes people can overcomplicate by going a lot of different directions, leaving the prospect kind of scratching their head saying, I don't know where you fit in. Let me learn more on my own before we ever talk again. Sometimes, in a very subtle way, overcomplicating things means, asking for permission. And as an example of that, Michael, is oftentimes I've listened to tens upon tens of thousands of salespeople make live calls. And the most common technique mistake I think I hear people make is, did I catch you at a bad time? Did I have a minute? Well, I think the minute the prospect hears that line, they're immediately saying, you caught me at a bad time, I don't have a minute, or you only got a minute and then we're done. Right? Yeah. So not asking for so much permission. And I think that can be a big technique challenge is again, not being authoritative, not having conviction and some degree of confidence in what you're saying. And then finally, for those that maybe haven't mastered a script and aren't at that robotic stage, they're just winging it. And although I said we want to make sure that every conversation is a unique conversation, the structure of it should not be. I should have a fairly single way that I'm trying to go with this call. I'm trying to find out this information, get to the appointment. I'm not trying to create a networking event or do this, that, or the other thing. And so I'm flying all over the place. So when people don't have a process, they can't repeat their success.
I think you nailed that one. And you're right. It's the same thing. It's the balance again. Do you overcomplicate it? Do you undercomplicate it? Do you have no system, or you're relying too much on the system? And I think what you hit there for me is the problem comes up when you sound like a salesperson. What we're trying to do in this no pressure prospecting course is teach people how to sell and do prospecting without sounding like a salesperson. If you're peddling, if you're pushing, if you're trying to do price cutting or other marketing gimmicks to get people interested or set the appointment, like you set an appointment with me, I'll bring over a free toaster, that's not helping you gain equal business stature, feel good about yourself as a salesperson, and most importantly, build trust with the prospect so that you have a great ongoing relationship. So I want to do this one a little quickly because we're starting to get short on time, and I want to get to what an actual no pressure prospecting call would sound like, Sean. But real quick, can we talk about some of these that you've already mentioned here and just reframe this as a no pressure call? You shouldn't feel like a salesperson. The person who's talking to you shouldn't feel like they're talking to a traditional salesperson, right?
Sure, and really it's about being collaborative, right? I want to be genuinely curious. I need to understand that when I get engaged in a conversation, not everyone's going to turn into a prospect or turn into a meeting. I'm simply using the conversation to kind of figure out, are you a prospect or are you not? And if you're not, that's okay. If you are, nature takes its course. We kind of have to understand, although it's not a complete numbers game, it's a scavenger hunt. And you know what? When I'm sent on a scavenger hunt, I have to go to this location and I'm looking for that thing. Maybe I find it, maybe I don't. If I find it, great. If I don't, I've got to really think about it. My fault, their fault, wrong place. When my wife sends me to the grocery store and says, get a can of that, and that can's not there, well, I'm not mad at my wife. I'm not mad at the grocery store. I'm just simply mad at me for not finding it. Right, so it is a bit of a scavenger hunt for us. I think we need to make sure we've got very specific goals for what we're trying to accomplish, whether it be appointments or referrals. So, be deliberate in your goal setting around prospecting. Schedule the time, treat it as important, treat it as a priority, and really work on practice. Practice, repeat. If you want to learn how to become a master at something, you've got to do it a lot, and you've got to role play on your dog, or role play with a peer, or role play with one of your mentors, but always be bouncing ideas off of people. And I think that's just a good way to kind of reframe or think about prospecting.
All right, now we're ready to make the call. We're picking up the phone and dialing the number. How do you see the best possible outcome or setting up the best possible outcomes for yourself as a salesperson?
Sure. So I think the first is, everybody has an opener, but I think that the goal of that opener needs to be disarmingly honest. And the sub goal to that is we can't trigger the prospect's initial negative reaction to receiving a prospecting call. So, very often I might simply say, good afternoon, Michael, Sean, Coyle, pause, let them engage in a dialogue. I assume my name's completely meaningless to you. And I get very positive responses. Oh, it's not meaning this, but it is unfamiliar. Or, no, it's, what can I do to help? Right? It's something that disarms the prospect. I'm looking for a little bit of help, or, I'm not sure if it makes sense for you to have a conversation. And I want to avoid what we would call the hate crime. How are you today? Right. Well, the minute I hear "How are you today" is the first line on a phone call, I know it's a salesperson, and I'm looking to get off. Once we kind of broke the ice, once we sort of begun the engagement, I want to create, just a quick set of expectations, what we at Sandler call the upfront contract. Why don't I take a moment, share the reason why I'm reaching out. If there's no value in another conversation, no harm. Otherwise, perhaps we'll end up looking out over the next couple of weeks and scheduling some additional time with one another. But let them know what's coming, how long it's going to take, what's going to happen, and what the expected outcomes are. And then from there, we want to make sure that we give that prospect some context, who we are, or who we're with, what we do at a very high level, and then share with people common challenges. Right? Using third-party stories. When I have an opportunity, Michael, to speak to the CEO of a mid-sized corporation, they share with me things like, problem A, problem B, problem C, any of that relevant, even worth a conversation in the future. And then at that point, you're engaged in a conversation. Well, those are certainly relevant to a lot of people. Wasn't sure, tell me more, be specific, give me examples. And then once we've gotten into that conversation, I think our instincts should tell us now's the point where it makes sense to suggest a logical, tangible next step, right? And so maybe it's 5, 7, 8, 9 minutes, 10 minutes. We say, let me make this suggestion. Why don't you invite me in, or why don't you invite me to a call, and let's talk more and learn more and share best practices. And if something doesn't happen, that's fine. We've wasted no time. If something does happen, we'll let it happen as it should. So begin to set the stage for the sales process. And then get the appointment booked, right? Get it in your calendar, get it in their calendar, use meeting invites, and any way that you need to do to secure that meeting. And then make sure that you avoid, no-shows and reschedules last minute. Nothing more frustrating than, being prepared to go on a sales call, showing up, and that person's not there. Well, the way to avoid that is discuss its possibility before you get off the phone. Like, hey, I'm looking forward to seeing you next Tuesday at 9 a.m. Do you see any reason why? We might have to cancel or reschedule last minute. Short of family emergencies, I'm going to be there. But is there something going on in the next couple of days that might prohibit you? Have that conversation, get a secondary commitment, hang up the phone, book the appointment, move on to your next call.
I think that's amazing. We could go into so much detail here about this. So I want to wrap up and tell people how to get more information, but then I'm going to stick around and we'll take some questions from the audience. I'll ask you a few and we can dive into a little bit more details here. But again, that link is sandler.com/no pressure prospecting. If you hit that link, you get 2 options here. You can sign up for the online course, do the self-study, move at your own speed. I know we blew through that no pressure prospecting call really quickly, but for $50, you can sign up for this online course, and in the course, you'll see exactly where we did that. So you'll develop your behavioral plan. We'll talk about how you set goals. You can download this worksheet where you write out your script and your 30-second commercial that's included in what Sean just described. But we'll talk about structuring the call. How do we make the call? How do we get more referrals and introductions? So we have to do less cold calling in the future, but there's a full-length role play of what a Sandler call should look like, free webinars, white papers, and all kinds of cool stuff to help you in your prospecting toolkit. So check that out. It's sandler.com/no pressure prospecting. All right, Sean, I wanted to go back and ask you a couple of things that I heard in there that might be unusual for people that haven't done this before. And one of the questions I see here is, you mentioned talking about common problems you solve. And I feel like maybe in our bullets here, there could be a 3.5 where we talk about diving deeper and exploring the issues that they have. How do you transition from, here's what I do, here's some common problems I have, do any of those ring a bell? And what if they say, yeah, tell me more about the security?
Sure. So, even in that transition, they've offered you some information. And one of the favorite things that I've heard in recent times is, be genuine in your curiosity when people offer information. And sometimes information is offered in the form of a question. So if somebody were to say, yeah, I'm real interested about what you guys are doing around prospecting or around leadership or around the financial services vertical, can you tell me more? I'm real happy to. And in fact, I could probably take all day and just sit here and blab on about it. Is there anything in particular you might be looking to hear about or to see from me? Well, I would like to know a little bit more about, how you help people just overcome the fear of making interesting. Tell me more about that. What gives you the sense? So I think every time somebody asks you a question or, asks for information from you, it's a wonderful opportunity to kind of dig a little bit deeper and find out what's the source of that question. Because most people don't ask questions just to fill the void of a conversation. They ask questions because there's a reason behind that question. And I think it's critical that we understand that the question they're asking isn't really what they're really asking. They're asking that to fulfill something that they haven't been able to articulate.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of times the transition is about asking another question, getting clarification, looking for people to expand.
And then I guess the other hard part of this, and I saw a couple of people mention it here online, is how do you know when to close for that appointment? Or we know we don't want to keep going and try and go for the sale here, but you're saying, hey, I interrupted you. Would it make sense if we explore that offline? I think you can kind of go too early or too late on that one. How do you know when's the right time to say, I want to explore that and I want to find that intent behind the question, but to explain my solutions to that, I probably need another appointment.
Sure. So for me, I use GPS as an analogy. When my GPS says destination is on the right, I know that means I have to turn the wheel of my car to the right and I am there. Well, that destination is on the right line comes to me in the form of an example when talking to a prospect. So that's a little cheat for everybody that's online today is, when somebody engages in that conversation, they're sharing information about some of the challenges that are applicable to your product or service. Ask them to give you an example. When somebody gives you that example, when I'm given that example, I feel that's the time to suggest that next step and take the deeper dive. So, I'm either listening for it or I'm soliciting it. But I think that's my cheat. If I can get an example, I think I can get an appointment.
That's awesome. So if they're saying, yeah, we've been thinking about that for a while, or yeah, it might come up, or that sounds interesting, probably not there. If they say, you know what, that just happened the other day with a client asked us for that, then you go, oh, okay, that's it.
Yep, and that's real, that's tangible, and it's logical to sit down with somebody that's an expert in fixing those problems to see if that fix is appropriate for the prospect.
Then I was going to give you a chance to close with, I think, one of my favorite things from the course, which is the gumball analogy, because I think we really need to bring this back to the mindset, that scavenger hunt of what you're looking for, and take the pressure off of yourself. Enjoy the sales profession, and enjoy the prospecting scavenger hunt, because it has nothing to do with you and your self-esteem. It's really about finding people that you can help. But you want to explain that one and then wrap up with any other final thoughts you have?
Sure. So, view the world that you're prospecting into as a gumball machine. And so if we think of that, it's a large transparent globe with hundreds, if not thousands of multicolored gumballs, and we can see them. And, for the purpose of my analogy, there's the green gumballs, where the green gumballs are the prospects that want to engage, that want to look for a solution, willing to schedule that next step, make that extra commitment. But then there's the orange gumballs. The orange gumballs might be arrogant or dismissive or satisfied with the status quo. And there's that blue gumball out there. And the blue gumball might need another conversation, might need, a little sample of what you're selling before they're ready to take that next step. But here's what I know. As I look at that gumball machine in the world that I prospect, there's 3 gumballs in there. There's the orange ones. And there's a lot of the orange ones in there. And I know when I turn the dial, no pun intended, of that gumball machine, I'm going to get some orange ones. Not the gumball machine's fault. It's not my fault. Not even the gumball's fault. It is what it is. And so I just toss it to the side and I turn it again and I might get another orange one. And I turn it again and I might get another orange one. But I'm not emotionally involved because I know eventually I might get the blue one. And I know how to handle a blue one because I see the blue ones in there. I'm also confident I'm going to get a green gumball because I see green gumballs in there, and they have not conspired to stay in the back of the gumball machine, never coming to the chute. So I think that's been a great mindset around looking. When I pick up the phone, I see a gumball machine. And I know there's the blue ones and the orange ones and the green ones, and I know I'm going to get a bunch of them every day. Sometimes I get more green than orange, or sometimes I get more orange than blue. I know it's going to happen. And am I always looking to improve technique, improve the quality of that engagement? No question. But from a mindset perspective, there's only 3 gumballs out there. And none of them are my fault. None of them are really, quite frankly, because of me or because of them. It is what it is. And so I think if you can develop that mindset, you take the pressure off yourself. You certainly take the pressure off the prospect. And another way to take pressure off, and I'll sort of close here, Mike, is it's really about separating decisions from habits. Today, many people make decisions. They make decisions to be combative. They make decisions to not make the call. They make decisions, to be afraid to call higher in an organization. What we have to do is take the decision making out of the equation. We have to start creating habits, right? Because the more habitual I am, the less I'm thinking about what I'm doing. And so I think the best habit to get into, especially as it relates to prospecting, is to stop thinking so much and start being more habitual.
I think that's amazing, and you gave us several huge things to leave on, and we'll wrap up maybe one attitude, behavior, and technique. But go to Sandler.com/no pressure prospecting. You can sign up for the online course. It's under $50. You can talk to a local Sandler trainer, and they can either bring in Sean Coyle or they can help you directly with your prospecting challenges. We also do corporate boot camps and things around prospecting. So a lot of options there if you talk to a local Sandler trainer besides the course. And my final thoughts here are the attitude you said I love. It takes the pressure off. If I'm looking to find out what color gumball they are, rather than trying to change an orange gumball to a green, all that pressure goes away. And then instead of putting the pressure on myself to sell you, put the pressure on myself to call higher or bigger accounts or better people that I've been afraid to reach out to, and put the pressure on myself to do those dials, to make it a habit, to make those things a part of my daily routine. And then the technique part is use that no pressure prospecting call to structure the call and know what your benchmarks and your GPS turns are without having a script of exactly what to say or sounding like a salesperson or a robot because I'm trying to do some magic tricks. So thank you for your time, Sean. Thanks for everybody else for joining us. Until next time, good luck and good selling. Go to Sandler.com/no pressure prospecting. Have a great week.